Okay, so today we are reviewing this book, Stephen King's The Eyes of the Dragon, a book that I just finished moments ago and I'm really excited to talk about. So if you have not seen my reviews before, I split them into two sections. I have a spoiler-free version that I do at the beginning and then a spoiler version that I do in the second half, but I do let you know when we get to that point, so don't worry. You will know when we get there. So, let's begin with the spoiler-free version as I discuss 3 pros and 3 cons about this book in as spoiler-free detail as I can, starting off with the 3 cons for this book. The first con for this book is the chapter's size. They greatly vary, and this might be a good thing for you, but it was an incredibly annoying thing for me. So let me give you an example, if I can find one without having to pause. Oh, goodness me. I'll quickly pause. Okay, so here's an example from towards the end. As you can see there, there's a few chapters. So on these 2 pages alone, we have chapter 117, chapter 118, and chapter 119, all in those 2 pages. And then there are other chapters that go on for quite a while. Now, this may just be King's writing style, and that's fine. It's not something that I've grown accustomed to, and I just found it a little weird. It's not really... It was off-putting to begin with because I hadn't experienced it before. By the end I got used to it, but to sum it up, it was just a bit weird for me to start a chapter and read 4 sentences and have the chapter be over, so I have to point that out. My second con about this book is that, okay, can we talk about villains for a moment here and their dense decision making. There are other words that I could use here, but I think this is the best one to use. Their dense decision making. Now, I want to give you an example of a villain, what's the word? A villain trope, or a trope really in any sort of a story that has a villain that is extremely well known, that gives you an idea of dense decision making by a villain. So you know the typical story. The villain spends most of the book trying to capture the good guy, the villain captures the good guy, and then the good guy is captured. All the villain has to do is the final blow, whatever that may be, to end the life of the good guy or to get what it is that they want to get out of this situation. And yet somehow the good guy enacts a bit of villainness within themselves and manages to con the villain into talking for hours and hours and hours about the who, what, where, why, when of how we got to this point. And we know by now, if you've read enough good versus evil stories, you know by now that the reason they do this... Oh, sorry about the lighting there. And we're back to normal. The reason they do this is to create a disturbance and to allow themselves, the good character, enough time to think of an escape plan, or to... Yeah, it gives the author also enough time to come up with a plot convenience. So if the good guy who's been cornered, or the good man, the good woman, the good boy, the good girl, whatever it is, knows they have backup coming, but backup is half an hour away, well, what's the best thing we can do? We can get the villain to talk. Now, while this is great for the good guy, and while in a thriller or a whodunit style book, I understand why it happens, big time, especially in a whodunit, you want all those ins and outs. I get it from a reader perspective. I also get it from a writer perspective. I've written 2 whodunit books, and so you want to know everything you've missed. But in a standard situation, all the villain has to do is make that final blow and the good guy is gone. And because they densely listen to the good guy, the good guy gets away. Like, seriously. That's not what the villain does in this book. This is a spoiler-free section. I'm going to keep it spoiler-free. But likewise, the villain in this book does make a very poor decision towards the end with something they do. Now, I'm not going to say whether the good guy wins or the bad guy wins, because really you don't know if the good guy or the bad guy is going to win until right towards the end anyway. It's very much up in the air, and that's part of what makes this book really exciting. But the villain makes this decision that I just couldn't for the life of me get on board with, and that has to go down as a con. Okay? Alright, now, my third con in this book is the backstory. Okay, so at the beginning of this book, King discusses the backstory in a very fairy tale-like way. I don't believe he says once upon a time, but it kind of starts in that vein. Well, actually, it starts with the words once in a kingdom. So, it's kind of once upon a time. And we get this backstory. Now, it needs to be understood that the backstory is relevant because there are things that King scratches the surface of in the introduction, I guess you could call it. It's not a prologue, but let's call it the introduction to this book, that you find out more about as you go along in the book, and you find out how important that is to know. But at the time when I was reading it, it felt like a slog. It felt like a slog to learn all of this backstory that did not at all seem necessary until the end. So for that reason, I do need to say that is my third con about this book, is the slog at the beginning. Although it works out in the end, at the beginning, it felt like a slog. You know what I mean. Now, let's get on to my 3 pros. This is going to be interesting. My second con, as you already know about this book, is that the villain makes a horrible choice, a horrible decision that for the life of me, I don't understand. I really don't. I will say that that horrible choice does not impact on anything, really. It's just something that I just don't understand why the villain did that. But anyway, so it might surprise you to know that my first pro for this book is the villain, outside of that one bad decision. If you want a full-on maniacal Jafar from Aladdin-esque villain, you have it in this book. This guy is crazy, but crazy in a way that you want your villains to be. Oh my god, love this guy. To give you a little bit of a physical description about him, which really doesn't give away much at all, he walks around all day when he's in the company of anyone aside from just being on his own. When he's in the company of anyone, he walks around with a hood over his head. So he's very mysterious anyway. But he also will whisper things a lot of the time, which makes him seem even more dark and more mysterious. But at the same time, you get this sense that he whispers because yelling is just beneath him. Another thing that I love in a villain, this villain isn't crazy for most of the story. Towards the end, yes, and it's very much just like Jafar in Aladdin. And I'm sure I'm not giving away much here with Aladdin. I'm sure you've seen it many times. I'm referring to the Disney version because that was my favourite version. I don't like the new version, but that's okay. I'm happy to stand alone with that. In the original version, Jafar is very calm and cool and collected for most of the film, and then he becomes rather maniacal towards the end, and you have exactly the same with this villain. He is very cool, calm and collected. He knows what he wants to achieve, and he sets out to achieve that. And in the end, he becomes extremely maniacal, just like Jafar, and it was amazing. And if you haven't caught on just yet, yes, Aladdin is my favourite Disney film, and yes, Jafar is my favourite villain of any Disney film. So I really appreciated that. The second pro for this book is there is a moment where one of the main characters, there's a couple of main characters, and King does take his time to make sure that you're introduced to every main character. They all kind of get a chapter at the beginning of the book, so you do get to know all of them. One of the main characters is placed into a bit of a jam. I'm not going to say what it is because this is spoiler free, but he's placed into a bit of a jam, and you can't help when reading this book but be intrigued as to how he's going to get out of the jam that he's been placed into. And when you work out his idea of how he's going to get out of that jam, then you can't help but be invested to see if that idea is going to work. And oh my god, it's just so intriguing. I mean, the villain is really intriguing, but this guy is a good guy character, and almost everything about the plot of this book really intrigued me all the way through. And I just have one word to say: napkins. If you've read this book, you know what I mean. Napkins. Some people don't want to read that word ever again. For me, really loved it. Okay, the third thing that I love about this book is the loyalty. Now, loyalty is something that, true loyalty anyway, is something that is extremely hard to come across in especially a lot of adult books, and this isn't definitely an adult fantasy. Well, I mean, they say King wrote it for his children, but I don't call it a YA. I'm sorry, I don't. I call it adult, but anyway. You don't see loyalty in extreme loyalty in a ton of adult fantasy books. Now, if you have, that's great. Please recommend them to me. But the loyalty of some side characters that are doing what they can purely out of loyalty to one of the main characters is extremely touching. Extremely touching. They will move heaven and earth, no matter the cost to themselves, just because they are so loyal to this character. And I really, really appreciate that. I've come across that in other stories, but I just don't feel, and other popular stories that I will not name drop here for fear of what will be said in the comments below, but because there are just some books that are popular that I don't think are as good as people say they are. But moving on. The way that it's done here, I really appreciate, because these side characters' lives could really be in danger, and at any moment they could wind up dead for what they're doing, and they don't have to do what they're doing. The safer option will be to not do what they're doing, but they don't care. They're just so loyal to this character, and I really do appreciate that. My fourth and final pro for this book is that there is no on-screen, and I say screen because when you read a book, you kind of get an idea in your mind. You can kind of picture what's going on. There's no on-screen romance in this book. There are romances that do occur behind the scenes, yes, but they are certainly not at the forefront. So what I mean by this is, I'm not saying that a side character has a romance and whatever. There are main characters who have romances, but their romances are discussed, say, among friends. Like, oh, I went to this person's house yesterday and I like this person. But you don't actually see the character with that love interest. So, and I love that because there's just way too much romance going on at the moment, and I'm kind of getting over it. But anyway, actually I do want to give you one more pro. I know we've gone on a very long time, but this particular version of this book, The Eyes of the Dragon, there are a couple of different versions, but this particular one has some amazing illustrations. So this is one example, and I'll get you another one that's as spoiler free as I can. Let's see. Okay, we'll go with this one. Really beautiful black and white illustrations throughout the book, and I just feel that enhanced the reading experience. You get a picture in your mind's eye, but then to see the illustrations as well, really, really beautifully done. Alright, we are already 14 minutes into this video and we have not started the spoiler version. So, if you are not joining us for the spoiler version, that's totally fine. Thank you for being here. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday with reviews, like this one, in between. And I'll see you next time. Peace, blessings, and so much love. Happy reading to you. We'll be back with spoiler version in just a moment. And welcome back. Now, this is the spoiler version of The Eyes of the Dragon by Stephen King. So if you don't want to know the spoilers, ding ding ding, this is where we're getting into it. So I've given you more than enough warning. Let's jump right in. Let's talk very quickly about the plot. Basically, this plot revolves around a king, at least at the beginning it does. A king, his servant, and his two children. He did have a wife, and she died giving birth to the king's second child. The king seems to be a merry old soul. No one seems to have too many issues with him. His not servant, more his advisor. His advisor is extremely mysterious. He's the villain I was talking about, and yeah, we'll leave that at that for the moment. The boys, however, could not be any more different. The boy who was born and the mother survived that birth, the first son to be born, his name is Peter, and Peter is... Peter is... Okay, just had a moment of, is it Peter, is it not Peter? Yes, it is Peter. Okay, so now that I've confessed that, let's move on. Peter is the golden boy. He does everything really well. He is the next in line for the throne, so if anything happens to his dad, or if his dad abdicates, he will take over, and yeah, he does everything he's meant to do. He is very gifted academically, athletically, in combat. He's very handsome. He's the golden boy, basically. Then you have his brother, and as I've already said, when the second child was born, the mother died from what we believe is childbirth. But anyway, we find out later that it's not. So there's another spoiler within this spoiler. Okay, the second child is born, and his name is Thomas, and Thomas is the exact opposite to Peter. He doesn't do really well. He's, not very smart, not very good looking, none of that stuff. So, over the course of their growing up, Peter is loved by a lot of people, while Thomas is not really loved at all, especially by his father, and all he wants to do is get the attention of his father. One day he spends an entire Saturday, I love that it's specified that it's Saturday, an entire Saturday trying to wield this boat that he crafts from a piece of wood for his father to remind him of outings they used to take a long time ago, and the father doesn't really seem to care. He fawns over it for like a sentence, and then he talks about Peter again, which is just really, really rude, and of course it's so annoying for Thomas, because he spent all day working on this boat, and his father's saying, yes, it's a fine boat, but maybe you should do this like what Peter's doing, and that's what he's always done. He's always shown favour to Peter all the time, and his father always seems to be disappointed that Thomas isn't taking the same lead as Peter is. One day, the king dies. Now, here's what's interesting. Prior to the king's death, the king's advisor, the mysterious guy under the cloak, befriends Thomas because he feels bad for the way that Thomas is being treated, and he wants to kind of take him under his wing and show him the love that his father's not giving him, which seems fine. But there's no ulterior motive, because when is there never an ulterior motive in these situations? And he takes Thomas down to an area where you can spy into the king's chambers. Now, the king has suddenly taken deathly ill, but he hasn't died, he's just ill, and so he's kind of ridden to his room, and so the son can now peek in and see what his dad's doing, and his dad's kind of going a little bit crazy, a little cray-cray as they say, having a bit too much of the drinky, if you get my gist. Yeah, and he's spiraling out of control. So Thomas loves that he has this opportunity to keep coming down here and spying on his father, but one day he spies something that changes the course of everything. In a matter of what seems like 48 hours, the the advisor comes in to give the king a glass of alcohol, his favorite beverage, but he has laced it with something that's going to kill him, and it eventually does. And Peter just so happens to be spying in the room, so he knows what's going on. He knows that his dad's now dead, and then somehow it's turned over to be Peter's fault, and everyone starts blaming Peter because he is the next in line to take the crown, and no one seems to think against this. It seems like a plausible enough reason, not so much innocent until proven guilty, more guilty because you had motive, and that's the end. So Peter is, well, not really tried, because he tries to arrange a trial, but it doesn't really work, and then he's locked away in this tower that is called the Needle, which I don't like that it's called that, but anyway. The reason it's called Needle is because it's a tower that is very high, and it comes into a point, so it kind of resembles a needle very loosely in the form of that tower. So it is against the law to execute royalty, but you can lock them away in the Needle, and they'll just rot there, basically. Well, they'll be given food, but they'll spend the rest of their life there, basically. And the next thing that Thomas knows, he's made king, and Thomas is not taking this well at all. The advisor says that he's going to leave because the king's now gone and no one else likes him, but his plan that he wanted to work does end up working for him, because Peter asks the advisor to stay to help him be king, just like he was with his father. So Flag, which is the name of the advisor, ends up staying and wreaks a ton of havoc, including raising taxes to 80%, which is kind of whoa. So poor Peter, he knows that he did not kill his father, but he gets very depressed very quickly because he doesn't see what he can do about it, and then one day, surged by some inspiration, he decides he is going to do something about it, and he requests to have two things brought to him. Let's go back to the beginning of the story, where we are shown two things that Peter's mother assisted him with. The first is a dollhouse that she was given when she married the king, and this dollhouse has things in it that have been enchanted, I suppose, or, well, either enchanted or they're just, whoever crafted this is amazing, because everything in the dollhouse is real. It will do what it's meant to do, it's just in miniature size. So, for example, there is an oven in this dollhouse, and if you touch it, you will burn yourself because it's actually hot, and it will actually cook really little tiny things. But anyway, so whoever crafted this, bless them. She shows Peter this dollhouse, and Peter loves it, and he ends up playing with it for quite a while, but he kind of plays with it in more of a boy way, so rather than, I don't know, doing the whole, oh, nice little family going on an outing, I don't know, like, seriously, I never had a dollhouse growing up, anyway, my sister did, but, yeah, I never had one, but, yeah, instead of doing what this book is saying is more of a female, girly way of playing with a dollhouse, he made it more masculine by saying that there were people who lived there that were involved in bloody battles every day and all this kind of stuff. The advisor doesn't like this. Flag doesn't like this. He advises the king to get rid of the dollhouse because it's turning Peter into a sissy. King's words, not mine. Don't like that word for many reasons. But the king ends up deciding that it's actually a good thing and doesn't get rid of it. The second thing that the mother has imparted on to Peter is she wants him to grow up to be a very well-mannered boy, to become a really good king, and she believes that one of the best things she can do to ensure that when he does eventually take the throne is that he has the best manners that he can have. And so she tells him, no matter what you do, always insist that you have a napkin on you so that you can, lay it on your lap and you can wipe your mouth when you're done with your meal and all this kind of stuff, because it is proper manners. And so he always does that. He never forgot that his mother told him that. So, back to the Needle. Peter decides a way to escape the tower is to order a ton of napkins and to use a loom, a miniature loom that is inside the dollhouse. He also requests the dollhouse to create a rope so that he can escape. This rope's going to take a long time to make. He doesn't even know if he's going to be able to get these products, but suffice to say he does, because this is already taking long enough to explain to you. And then he finally decides to descend the tower. Along the way, there are characters that he has grown to love, some from childhood, others maybe not from childhood, but these characters are extremely loyal to him and they're trying to do whatever they can to assist Peter to escape, even though there's not really a lot they can do. Peter eventually does attempt to escape, and Flag finds out about this. Flag, it turns out, is a magician. Flag goes to the Needle, and this is the dense decision that I feel that he made. To get to the top of the tower, there are many stairs because it's a very high tower. From the moment Flag gets in, he is yelling as he's running up these stairs, "Peter, I'm coming to get you. I'm going to..." Lots of violent things that he's threatening. I just don't think this was a good decision, because if you were quiet and maybe walked up the stairs quietly, he wouldn't have even known you were coming. Anyway, so the more that Flag is yelling out all these threats, the closer Peter knows that he is, so he gets more time to go, okay, well, he's at the bottom of the stairs right now, so if I grab the rope now, okay, he's about halfway now, I should be starting to climb down, because by the time he gets up here, I'll be gone. You see where I'm going with this? Eventually, he starts climbing down the tower, and the rope does snap because it's not thick enough, but he lands on a pile of a 20-foot tall pile of napkins that his friends have set up for him, and he ends up getting out, and yeah, he drives Flag away, and the end. There's a lot more to the story, but I've already taken up way too much time. Ultimately, I gave this book 4 stars because it was such a captivating read. Now, I do have to say, though I'm not going to mention what it was, I was reading another book, and if you want to know which one, all you really need to do to put 2 and 2 together is look at my midweek vlog, that is the video right before this one, to see which book I'm referring to. But I was reading another book alongside this one that I just was not enjoying at all. It was painful to get through. So part of me does feel that part of the reason why I love this book is because it was such a great relief from the other book that I was reading that I promised myself I wouldn't DNF no matter what. Why do I come up with these things anyway? But also, once I had finished that book that I wasn't loving, I was still absolutely intrigued in this book. Peter and his escape plan to try and get out of the Needle really intrigued me. Flag as a villain really intrigued me. One thing that I was upset with is I wanted to see more of what Peter was doing as a king, because we know he's been made king, but the only thing we really know that he has done is that he set the taxes to be extremely high and that he drinks a ton of alcohol every night, which is fine. But I would like to have known more about what Peter had done while he was king. But otherwise, I loved this book. I thought it was amazing. And I have said before, I've read Pet Sematary by Stephen King and the Scary Story of Bad Dreams, something along those lines. I keep misquoting the book name. A compendium of 20 mini books. Both of those books are horrors, and I read both of them hoping they would scare me. None of them scared me as much as I was hoping they would, but what I loved about King was his plots, because he writes intriguing stories. Now, yeah, some of them are hit and miss, but some of them are really well written. So when I picked up this book, I went into this one thinking, Hopefully it's going to be an intriguing plot, and it's not a horror. It's not meant to scare me. Quite frankly, I think towards the end, I was getting more scared in this book than I was in Pet Sematary. Yeah, if you've seen the film, read the book, then get back to me. Because it just didn't scare me. This one I felt scared me more than Pet Sematary, but anyway. But this book delivered. Stephen King wrote an amazing plot. The plot was a really good read. It filled the brief for a fantasy, and I had a wonderful time. So, I've given it 4 stars. Alright, so that's where I'm going to leave this review. If you have any comments, thoughts, and or questions, please do not hesitate to leave them in the space below. Once again, I do post videos every Wednesday and Sunday with reviews in between. Until next time, mwah, peace, blessings, and so much love. Please do stay safe during this COVID-19 pandemic, and I'll see you next time. Happy reading. Bye.